Greetings. Today I want to talk about and expand upon what Barbaros had very briefly mentioned in his minute-and-a-half video, his most recent one, not the one prior to it, which I do actually want to talk about, and I want to expand on some of those topics that he mentioned, but the most recent one. And MGTOW should be talked about frequently, or to the extent that it must be talked about. There is a lot of confusion, I think, that arises from this, and I think the reason why people say you shouldn't talk about it, well, there's several reasons, and there's several responses. Now, of course, talk about MGTOW frequently. Some people, however, abuse the title. Take Sandman, or Sandscam, as I like to call him. He'll make a video about toothpaste and just slap on the MGTOW there for the purposes of search engine optimization. That has nothing to do with MGTOW, and we need a lot less of those sorts of videos with MGTOW attached to the topic, where essentially it comes down to just bitching about women. I see a lot of this, and I think a lot of the perception of MGTOW, unfortunately, has been marred by, not that we should necessarily be concerned with perception, but we should be concerned with the accuracy of perception. And if the perception is false, that MGTOW is simply about bitching about women, which is what Sandman's channel is mostly about, then I think we have a problem. And it's unfortunate because he is now, I don't consider him a man going his own way, but he at least has in the title, he's a pseudo-MGTOW, and people associate him with MGTOW. It's a problem. He's not going away. We're unfortunately stuck with him, and he'll continue to con people. But, you know, let's actually get at what talking about MGTOW is about and why people have a problem with it. Well, for one thing, let's go back to the original point. Bitching about women isn't helpful to anyone. It doesn't explain anything. It doesn't accomplish anything. And I'm really tired of these folks who do it. I do understand the initial process when one's coming to terms with things, but this is not helpful, and I don't think it fits into a definition of MGTOW. However, before proceeding, I want to tell you a little story, and I'm going to relate it to some of the points. So this previous Sunday, I was looking to get my coffee fix, and well, in Germany, most things are closed on Sundays. And so the only thing reasonably near was a McDonald's, that Stygian pit of Abaddon, a place I almost never go to except occasionally on a Sunday to get a coffee or a cappuccino. And so I worked up my resolve and made my way thither. And the service was abominable. There were two queues. They were enormous. Everyone was frustrated, etc., etc. There was a couple, not directly in front of me, but between me and this couple, there was a guy, and to make a long story short, apparently, I didn't see it, the guy was checking out the girlfriend of the guy in front of him, that is, two people in front of me, and the boyfriend made a big scene, became hostile, physically aggressive, etc. I briefly intervened, as did others, and the interesting thing there was that he asked me what my business was, and I said, look, there's no need to make a big deal of this. I could see his girlfriend was kind of encouraging him. And he asked what my problem was. I said, you know, you don't even know if he was checking your girlfriend out, for one. And another point is, why does it even bother you? And it went on and on. He asked me if I was checking out his girlfriend. I said, no, I didn't even look at your girlfriend. I don't find her attractive in the slightest. I was honest. Now, this guy was a head and a half taller than I was, and significantly bigger. I would have lost in a fight. He obviously took offense at me saying that his wife or girlfriend or whatever was not very attractive. And fortunately, everyone else was tired of this ruffian, and so collective peer pressure, if you will, weighed in, and even his girlfriend became embarrassed, and they actually left. And I ended up never getting my coffee because the queues were so long. This is what Barbaros once referred to as the alpha male primitive. And I'm going to be relating some of the points I talk about later on in this video to that. But part of the problem people have with the idea of MGTOW is they don't understand what it is. It's terribly defined. Even to this day, it's been the MGTOW, particularly YouTube activity, has been pretty intense over the last 3 or 4 years. And people still don't understand it. People argue about what it is and what it's not. We certainly have we know that MGTOW, for example, can't be married. That's not even, it's not a question of up for debate. It's just, you know, it's like saying a dog is a cat. A dog is not a cat. It just doesn't fit into the equation. But there are other aspects of MGTOW that I think need to be better defined and better understood. And we do ourselves a disservice when we don't try to define it, and indeed more narrowly define it than simply someone who's abstemious or someone who abstains from marriage or what have you. Now, most people might take a cursory glance at a concept such as MGTOW or just MGTOW in general, and they think, well, bachelor, right? And almost to a T, usually a man going his own way is some variant of a bachelor. Men going their own way don't get married. They usually live on their own, etc. Okay, but, and this is what people have called MGTOW, and then they like to leave it at that. Why don't you just, live your bachelor life and leave it be? But the problem, and this is what I mean about defining things and expanding upon things, is that MGTOW is a lot more than just being a bachelor. And it's certainly a lot more than bitching about women. In fact, bitching about women, it really has, to me, nothing to do with MGTOW. That actually, the funny thing about the whole bitching about women, I call it a movement because I see this throughout the manosphere. I see it on Fakebook. I mean, Sandman's channel is essentially about bitching about women, etc. It's very popular, but bitching about women is actually a blue pill activity. It's not a red pill activity. That's the irony of Sandman's daily dose of red pills. They're not red at all. They're completely blue, because wasting your time bitching about women and women's cosmetics and what have you, that is the hallmark of blue pill. It shows you're still concerned about these things. It shows you're still involved with the whole, I need to somehow pay attention to the female, etc. True MGTOW have moved beyond that. So what does that actually entail? It's not about bitching about women, and it's a lot more rigorously defined than bachelorhood. I mean, yes, we're by default bachelors, but we're a lot more than that. To me, and take it or leave it, this is how I perceive MGTOW. This is how what I think it is. MGTOW is a lot more rigorous than just one or two things. And in fact, if I were to try to simplify it in a few catchphrases, which I'm not very good at, and I'm also disinclined to do so, I look at MGTOW as the embodiment and the encapsulation of the best of male virtue. By virtue, I don't mean the moral virtue. I mean the ancient Greek term, arete, and by that, it's oftentimes and translated into English as excellence, right? So the idea of arete, I think, embodied in MGTOW. This being that MGTOW ideally embodies the best of male attributes and eschews the worst. Getting back to my story, what are some of the worst of male attributes? I mean, we all know what some of the bad attributes of women are. We know we don't often talk about the worst of male attributes, although we sometimes talk about male enablers. Well, think about the alpha male primitive I encountered on this previous Sunday at the Pit of Abaddon, McDonald's. This is a perfect example of some of the worst of male attributes. Aggressive, violent, all in relation to a female. Let's contrast that with a man going his own way, who's interested, say, in arete, that is independent of the female. It's often lauded, or men are often lauded for being fantastic supporters of their families, of their genetic legacy. The fact that they go in, day out to work and stress themselves out in order that their offspring might prosper, blah, blah, blah. Now, this may be virtuous, it may not be, but this has actually nothing to do with the best of male qualities. If you think about it, the best of male qualities throughout history have been the contemplative endeavors, the intellectual endeavors, the things that really transform society and human civilization as we know it, have not simply been the passing on of genes and working to support your progeny and offspring. So MGTOW, in some sense, is part of that legacy, in that even though most of us are never going to achieve that, either that intellectual capacity or the contemplative capacity of people, men who've gone previously down this road, we at least can strive towards that end, and we can achieve on our own terms a similar mode of thought and a similar mode of being. That is to say, trying to dedicate oneself to personal excellence in a realm that has very little to do with what is conventionally regarded as virtuous, busting your ass to support offspring or being chivalrous to women, etc., etc. Now think about it. With few exceptions, I mean, Einstein was one, but with few exceptions, some of the greatest minds who have lived, some of the certainly the contemplatives, but certainly the intellectual powerhouses of the past, the Leibnizes, the Descartes, all of these thinkers, these were childless men. These were men who were not particularly interested in the cyberitic, and they dedicated themselves to their own endeavors. And people might have thought they were odd or strange, but they didn't really care. They still did their own thing. And I think, to me, that is the legacy of MGTOW, and that's certainly a primary defining factor, or rather defining factor that differentiates itself from something such as mere bachelorhood. Along with the concept of arete, that is, trying to achieve personal excellence in the realm of the mind, there is also the aspect of understanding and comprehension. MGTOW try to understand what it means to be human. They understand their negative aspects, and the reality is, men, that we can actually relate to this. Not, I mean, in a sometimes a much more distant way. I mean, I no longer can relate to the alpha male brute who was harassing this guy and harassing the other people at the pit of Abaddon, but I nonetheless can dimly recall, and I know what it's like. You get worked up and what have you. And a MGTOW, a man going his own way, is aware of this. He's aware of the pitfalls. He's aware of what I might refer to as evolutionary backsliding. He's aware of the kinds of behavior and traps you can fall into that are really oppositional to any idea of arete or virtue. And once again, I'm not using this in a moral sense. And being cognizant of our evolutionary past, of what it means to be human, what it means to be a male, excuse me, what it means to be a female, and your own individual relationship to that evolutionary past as well as the rest of the world, is probably the largest part of going your own way. If going your own way were simply about abstaining from marriage, and until the laws are fixed, whenever that happens, maybe 1,000 years hence, then yeah, that's all going your own way is about, is being a bachelor. No, men going their own way try to understand the very nature of things. They try to understand their own human nature, and many of them engaged in the physical sciences try to understand the reality outside of the human. That's something that is very peculiar and particular to men going their own way, in a sense, not that they're the only ones doing. Obviously, scientists are trying to do this, but most men going their own way who do this are doing it from a different perspective. They're no longer involved in the game. They've taken a step back, and they're looking at it from outside of it. They're looking from outside the looking glass, if you will, whereas many people are pursuing these things and not trying to understand, but while they're still trapped, essentially, within the looking glass, within the prison. So, one part of the problem of not talking about MGTOW is that it's poorly defined. I'm trying to define it here. Concepts such as arete, concepts such as evolutionary awareness, cognizance of some of the negatives of being either a female or a male, and this previous Sunday was a perfect example of some of the worst aspects of male behavior. So we do need to talk about MGTOW, and frequently, I would say. But we need to talk about it in a way that makes sense, and we need to talk about it with some sort of definition. If MGTOW were to forever, as a concept, remain completely nebulous and ill-defined, or non-defined for that matter, people can take it for what it is. And certainly, if you're an individual, you can call yourself whatever you want. You can be a thrice married transvestite and call yourself a man going your own way. I mean, it's not my business. But even though perception in and of itself isn't a problem, because generally speaking, we don't care about what others think, false perception is, because if people are falsely perceiving things, right, then they're going to have talking points and talk about MGTOW as a concept where it's completely irrelevant. As I have to bring this up again, the bitching about women thing. This is something that I think personally has infected the MGTOW community. For a long time, before SandScam came onto the scene, MGTOW was really flourishing. Some of the comments were insightful, really interesting stuff. And I've seen an influx that's incidentally coincides with Don't Talk About MGTOW, with the whole I'm going to bitch about women, and that's essentially going your own way. People get the not the wrong idea, but they perceive things incorrectly because the message and the ideas are being conveyed incorrectly, essentially. Now, that's not universally true, but this is part of the problem and why people say don't talk about MGTOW. Nobody wants to. I don't even want to hear about people bitching at women. If people actually have an insightful, incisive observation to make about women, somehow in relation to men or society as a whole, or evolutionary past or history, okay, I'm all ears. But bitching about women's cosmetics or toothpaste or whatever and slapping MGTOW into the title is not the best way to go about it. And unfortunately, numbers do a lot of talking, and this is one of the fundamental problems, I think, because we talk about MGTOW without a firm understanding of what it is and what it entails. A lot of people do think that MGTOW simply is being a bachelor and complaining about women. And once again, let me bring up my point again, that complaining about women, bitching about women, is the hallmark of blue pill activity. It shows that you're still concerned about what women think, what they want, and it's very indicative of someone who is a long way away from going his own way, I think. So MGTOW, above all, is a state of mind, and there's an intellectual side to it. If MGTOW, as I said, were simply about abstaining from marriage, that's all it would be. It would just because it's dangerous. It would be, oh, I'm a bachelor. Looks dangerous. I could lose my assets. I could lose my money, and blah blah blah. I'm not going to get married. No, it's more than skin deep. It goes to the spirit. It goes to the mind. MGTOW try to understand the world they live in. They try to understand themselves, and within their own limited capacity, we try to strive for something that might be akin to arete, not to be confused with the sort of moral virtue that's attached to the word sometimes, but rather, excellence. We try to do what we can to further ourselves and our understanding. Now, if people were to take that definition of MGTOW, first off, they would be confused about it, because most people don't want to talk about definitions. They don't want to try to understand things, and there's another aspect to this. Why do people say, oh, I don't want to hear about going your own way? Well, I mentioned already the aspect of just bitching about women. That's just tedious, and it explains nothing and it accomplishes nothing. But we'll leave that to SandScam and the rest of them, the fake MGTOW. There's another aspect to this, though. People don't want us, or anyone for that matter, to talk about MGTOW, that is, MGTOW concepts, thoughts, philosophy, actual content, because it reminds them of the reality they live in. And as Barbaros had mentioned in not his previous video, but the video prior to that, which I want to expand upon in the next video, people are terrified of reality. Men and women both have different, for the most part, differentiated mechanisms for fleeing from reality. But certainly men don't want to hear about MGTOW because, well, it reminds them of the predicament they're in. It reminds them of the, as I like to call, the Einsteinian loop of insanity they find themselves in, and in which they are, of course, active participants. Women, on the other hand, they don't want to hear about men going their own way because it reminds them of their flaws and fallacies and problems and the mistakes they make. And it also reminds the world that they're hardly the virtuous, and now I'm using the conventional sense, creatures of heaven that they make themselves out to be. No, we take a flat and objective look at things for the most part, and both men and women, albeit for differentiated reasons, different reasons, they're quite disturbed by this. This probably, I would say, is maybe the major factor in people not wanting to hear about MGTOW. Why they say, oh, just shut up and go your own way, live your life, blah, 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 blah. Okay, we can all do that, and we are doing that. But men who want more, who want to understand, who want to seek to grasp things, they're not going to be content with it. They're not going to be satisfied with that. They're going to want more than just leaving themselves to their own thoughts and sort of contemplating their navels. I do that a fair bit, but still, at some point in time, there comes a time to express yourself and speak out. And I think this is key in why MGTOW should be talked about frequently and why it should have a name. There should be an appellation. It shouldn't just be MGTOW is whatever you want it to be. Now, you can call me exclusionary for that or whatever, but as long as MGTOW is poorly defined and people are going to attach whatever definition they want it to be, they're going to say MGTOW can be married. They're going to say MGTOW who engage in perpetual women bitching or bitching about women are somehow the primary exponents of MGTOW, and so anything goes. Look, it's important not for PR reasons, but so much as for MGTOW themselves to find a definition that works well, that is encompassing of the general principles of men who decide to go their own way. And as I said, it's part of a larger legacy. It's part of a larger legacy of men who decide to dedicate their minds and indeed their bodies to the contemplative, the intellectual, and trying to understand the world, whether that world is external to themselves or the world within. In the case of people trying to understand the human ape, the human animal. And getting back to the McDonald's story, this is a perfect example of what MGTOW is not. A man going his way, eschews that kind of behavior. That is a foreign animal. That guy, the guy who was harassing everyone and making a ruckus in the pit of Abaddon, that is alien behavior. It is because eventually, in going your own way, you see that kind of thing, and you can no longer relate to it. You can dimly remember thinking such things. But that is the alpha male primitive that Barbarossa talked about a long time ago. And that's another thing that distinguishes MGTOW from the rest of men. We try to master our instincts. This is so crucial. And once again, bitching about women is capitulating to your instincts. Rather than trying to understand, and you bitch. In this case, this guy was bitching because he felt his prize, his property, his woman was somehow being gawked at, and then he took offense, and because she's somehow representative of him, and blah, blah, blah. We have nothing to do with that because we've removed ourselves from that sphere. We've removed ourselves from that perception of reality, that way of living. And that's why I mentioned that. So there are a number of things that can be, defined as MGTOW, but there are also a number of things that cannot be defined as MGTOW. And we should talk about MGTOW. We should talk about it sensibly, though. We should talk about it in a defined manner. We shouldn't just go about it willy-nilly. Bitching about women, like I said, is not going your own way. It's as blue pill as you can get. It's, in fact, probably some of the most blue pill activity out there. Complaining about women's cosmetics or their pocketbooks or the fact that they want you to spend money on drinks. That is blue pill all the way. Alternatively, it's simply being a bachelor doesn't fit the criteria of being a MGTOW because there are tons of bachelors who, they're just bachelors because they like the lifestyle, okay, but they're not necessarily invested in comprehending the world and comprehending themselves. They're just kind of out to have a good time. Is that an aspect of going your own way? Well, sure, personal freedom, the ability and the flexibility to do what you want within limitations. Of course, that's an aspect of going your own way, but I would argue it's not the primary aspect because if it were, then bachelorhood would be the same thing as going your own way, and it's most certainly not. So we should talk about MGTOW. We should talk about it frequently, but we should talk about it sensibly. MGTOW are differentiated from quote-unquote normal men for the reasons I cited. First off, we don't engage in the sort of ruffian-like brutish activities that occurred this previous Sunday in the pit of Abaddon we call McDonald's. MGTOW, generally speaking, strive for understanding and a kind of excellence in arete that, for the most part, in most men, is relegated to their work in relation to how much money they make and in relation to how they want to impress women. Whereas the arete that the individual man going his own way strives for the most part, is for himself. It is an arete of self-interest, and thus to be differentiated from the arete, if you want to even call it that, of men who aren't going their own way. And lastly, of course, as I mentioned before, the reason why people tell us and men going their way to shut up about MGTOW and just keep it to yourself is because both men and women, albeit for different reasons, are reminded of their flaws, their foibles, and the fallacies they commit. And nobody wants to be reminded of that. We want to pretend, collectively as a species, that we have no fundamental problems. We want to pretend that there are no incongruities in the reality we live in, the way in which we live in reality. We want to pretend that everything is as it should be, when indeed it is not. We want to pretend that there is no conflict between modernity, mechanization, modernization, and human nature. We want to pretend all these things, and what do we do as men going our own way? We say the opposite. We say there are many problems associated with mechanization, modernity, and human nature, because human nature has not changed in potentially hundreds of thousands of years, and the world around us is changing in the equivalent blink of an eye. And we remind people of that, and it scares them. So fear, for the most part, fear of being reminded of fallacy, of committing error, and most importantly, fear of being reminded that things are not as hunky-dory as you always pretended to be. Well, that is a key aspect to people saying don't talk about MGTOW. Anyway, gentlemen, that's enough on this topic. I want to cover in the next video the contemplative tradition in relation to MGTOW, vaguely related to meditation and what have you, and also touch upon, as well expand upon, some of the topics that Barbaros had brought up in his previous video. Not the last one, but the one prior to that one. As always, thanks for watching. Enjoy your week. And as always, may the gods, whichever ones you choose to worship, watch over you. Bye-bye.